McGraw-Millhaven on KTRS.
(9:10) here on the Big 550 KTRS. Darren Criss, who plays Blaine from Glee, is going to join us a little bit later on in the show. But with all this talk about the heroin epidemic here in Missouri, we thought as a chance to tell the story again, and I don't think it can be told enough because we are headed for a disaster and nobody wants to talk about it. Here in studio with us is John Stuckey and his mother, Jan Stuckey. John and Jan, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks.
Pretty gut-wrenching to tell your story publicly, so let's get right to it. John, how old are you?
I'm 28 years old.
When you went to high school in Ohio, right?
Yes.
And your mother and father got transferred here to work for Energizer, and they've been here for a number of years. High school and family, you were given every opportunity, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I played a lot of sports in high school, varsity, went to college, graduated.
Upper middle class upbringing, would you say?
Yeah.
Parents did all the right things, right? Made you study,
brothers and sisters.
Made you go to school, right? Perfect household.
Yep.
When did you start taking heroin?
Probably about 4 years ago.
How did you start taking heroin?
Well, I had a problem with drinking, and I had got a couple DUIs and was trying to make a transition from drinking and got into some painkillers. And shortly after that,
Where'd you find the painkillers?
Through friends that had prescriptions or family members that had prescriptions, things of that sort. And shortly after that, I was shooting heroin.
Okay, stop for a second. Was it a party? Was it a Saturday night here? Try this painkiller? Was it a Tuesday afternoon? I mean, take us to the first time somebody offered you a prescription painkiller, which was, I guess, either taken from their parents' medicine cabinet or stolen or given to them because they had pain or something. Take me through that first time.
Well, most of it started when more in college, and people would just have them out, and I would take them when I was drinking, and that's why when I switched from drinking to opiates, I knew that it's a lot of the same receptors with the two, and I know that and the feeling was very similar with having the more control over myself without having the problem of alcohol.
So how hard was it to get, or how relevant or how prevalent was prescription pain pills, and how readily available were they in college?
Very. I mean, medications, all sorts of medications are very
So it
available.
was not hard to get pain pills in college?
No, not at all.
What about after college? How hard was it to get these pain pills?
Well, after college, I moved out here and took a full-time position, and that was a little more difficult just because I was working 60, 70 hours a week, and finding things off my work schedule was very difficult.
Right. But you still found it.
And I still found it. And once I found it, it was very prevalent.
Was because it was harder to find, do you think that's why you then made the leap to heroin?
Well, with opiates, it's a very progressive disease, and the amount of money that it costs to fulfill your need for the drug it becomes very expensive, and heroin is a less expensive way of going about it than painkillers.
First time you took heroin, did you realize you were, because when I grew up, heroin was nowhere to be found. Cocaine was around. I knew the guys who did cocaine. I never did. But it was out there. Heroin is like Jupiter. So when you're talking to people now and heroin shows up in an upper middle class family and household, that's the story. When you took the heroin for the first time, did you realize you were taking, take me through your mindset.
Well, like I said, I was still in the transition of drinking, so I had still been drinking, and I would just be out and run into a crowd, and it started off shortly, alcohol and opiates, and it was partying, and then very shortly after that, it just became strictly opiates.
Did a friend give it to you? Did you go seek it yourself?
It was actually a girl that I was seeing at the time. Her group of friends were involved in it, and it was one of those things that I was just around it, and it became second nature to me.
Did you snort it? Did you smoke it? Did you shoot it the first time?
I snorted it, and then probably a couple months into it, I started shooting it.
You started shooting it. Jan, you're the mom.
Yes.
I have a hard time hearing this story. You've heard this story numerous times. You've lived this story. When did you first realize your son was addicted to heroin?
Not early enough, apparently. He masked it well, so it wasn't until a couple months, well, probably 4 to 5 months into it, that I realized, the weight loss, the stress, the always having excuses for where he was going or needing money or, living somewhere else or something like that. You just kept thinking, what? But it never entered my head.
5 months, though, that's pretty quick. I mean, some people go years without, right? Is that true, John? I mean, did it take her 6 months?
It was probably more about a year and a half before they found it. Like she said, I masked it very well. I had a full-time job, and it wasn't until I lost that job that it was very apparent that I had no money and debt was building up, and so that's how they found out.
What's the worst thing not the worst thing you did on heroin, what's the worst thing you did to get the money for heroin?
Well, there's a long list of things. I mean, you become very manipulative in different ways of getting money, a lot of different scams. Like I said, I had a full-time job, but then along with that, I had another full-time job, and that was getting money of different sorts, credit cards, pawning things.
Did you steal?
I personally didn't, but I was around a lot of people that did. I mean, the stuff that you're probably talking about, I know a lot of people that did a lot of things. I didn't personally do a lot of those. I mean, but I was around, and
you either helped or saw or were there in the room when it was going on.
Yeah.
Where do you get the heroin?
That's the other thing. I mean, I mask it very well, and the people that are selling the drugs, they mask it very well too. They're very it's even to meet up with your dealer is a process. But it's around everywhere, but to actually, they hide it very well. And they're very, I mean, with the laws that hold with getting caught with it, people are very sneaky about the roundabout way of getting it.
Who, and profile for me, who were your fellow heroin users?
Well, I mean, they're not going to be your prominent people in the world.
But I mean, were they your age? Were they older? Were they women? Were they men? Were they girlfriends? Were they best friends? Were they drug friends? Were they 50-year-olds? Were they 25-year-olds?
Mostly girls, and some guys, but mostly girls. Most of my dealers were users too, just trying to feed their own habit.
Right.
So the cycle just continued.
How long from start to finish did you? Because you're clean now, right?
Yes.
How long have you been clean?
6 months.
6 months. How long did you do heroin for?
About 3 years.
About 3 years. In that 3 years, and I guess since you started, did you have any connection with meth and the users of meth?
Some, yes.
Yes. Did you ever do meth yourself?
Yes, I have.
You have. Because a lot of law enforcement officials come onto the show and say that the heroin trade and the heroin epidemic is feeding the meth epidemic and vice versa. Would you agree with that?
Well, I found personally the people that do heroin, once they get on heroin, everything else is second to none.
Right.
I mean,
but would people buy cold tablets to sell on the black market to get money for heroin?
yes.
So that's a way people raise money for heroin.
Yeah. I mean, when you have a heroin habit, you find a lot of different ways to get money. I mean, selling to people to feed their habits with other things. I mean, it's
That's a
vicious-
common way, though. That's very, very common.
Yes.
Jan, the mom, when you found out, did you find out? Did your own conclusion come to it? How much of it did you look the other way, looking back on it? How did you find out that he was on heroin?
A friend of his told me.
A friend of his.
Yes.
Was the friend a user as well, or was it a non-user? So
No.
a friend ratted him out, basically,
No.
or came to you.
Gosh,
and,
I wouldn't call it ratting
well,
out at all.
but I mean, he would have said that at the time. Don't tell my mom, right? But he did the right thing. Went to you and said, "John's on heroin."
Yes. Yeah.
What'd you do then?
I spent the whole evening searching the internet as to how you figure out what you do about this because I was unaware of it at all.
Did you believe him? The friend.
I guess yes, because there was no other explanation as to why everything was going down and bad so fast.
Right. So you and your husband searched the internet all night.
Yeah, calling intervention lines, just trying to figure out what. And we had talked with a therapist before about other things, and I had called them, and they had said they've heard about ARCA.
Right.
And
ARCA, the Assisted Recovery Centers of America, which is a sponsor of the show,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why you're on the show, is that we not only advertise them, but we support them and promote them, and the story needs to be told. So we're glad you're here. Hold that thought. We're going to come back. I want to talk more about ARCA and what happened and what's going on now. John Stuckey is with us, as well as his mom, Jan. Was addicted to heroin for 3 years, clean for 6 months. Back in a moment on the Big 550 KTRS.